Welcome back to The Empire Never Ended with Boris and Ray and Fritz. You get the whole
Fritz is back.
Today. Yeah. Get your money's worth. I've been gone. Special
How's your mission progressing?
Terribly. Big mistake, this mission. It is really not working out. I didn't see one alien. Not one.
Oh, fuck. How's that possible?
I know. Yeah, I went all the way out there, Kelly Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Went all the way there. What do I find but an empty field, one UFO without a single inhabitant, some bugs, and then like a statue of what I think was a small black child waving a Confederate flag.
Oh.
Which I guess not a huge surprise. It does kind of support the old episode, but now I was really looking for some goblins. Didn't find a one. Not even a stuffed toy of a goblin. Nothing.
Depressing.
Very depressing. Yeah. So Kelly Hopkinsville, not so fun. Not the Roswell of Kentucky. I'll tell you that.
But
much.
there is like an alien statue of some kind, right? Like a UFO.
There's just like that UFO thing, but that's literally it. Like I didn't see anything in the city. No like, hey, UFOs here. No little green men like toys. No like they don't play it up at all. They have like one day where they have a festival, and that's in August, and that seems like it. Yeah. So damn.
That sucks.
Yeah, it does suck. It was a huge bummer. And it wasn't like the only Confederate flag around either, but no aliens.
Sure.
No aliens. Just the one flying saucer and an empty stage in a gigantic empty field. It's really weird.
Well.
And Confederate flags.
So your secret mission ended up being completely bunk.
Completely bunk. Yeah. It's just a few minutes down the highway from the Jefferson Davis Memorial, which is this like Washington Monument style pillar that like juts out of the ground and you can see it from everywhere. And it's I guess the president of the Confederacy was born just minutes away from the landing site of the Kelly Goblins. So if you're into aliens, not the best place to go, but if you really like the Confederacy, this is your place
to go. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you got it all. Just it's right in your face.
Yeah. Fuck me.
Yeah. So I don't know. I was hoping for some fun follow-up stuff. Maybe a little bit of get some some kind of weird Americana. Maybe even squeeze an episode out of it. But it's just more racist horror. Yeah.
Yep.
So instead, we're just going to continue
Yeah, to cheer you up, we have a new episode about Father Kajević.
That's right, yeah.
One of our best characters, in my opinion.
He is, though. He's an interesting one.
And he will continue to be. There are some like twists and turns here in his life story. And to my surprise, we'll do 2 more episodes, like this one and 1 more episode about him before we move on to other members of his group. Yeah.
How?
By the way,
I'm just curious. How long does this guy live?
He's alive.
He's still alive after all this. After all this alcohol.
His brother just died.
Yeah.
Last year.
Who was younger.
Man.
But severe, crazy alcoholic.
Well, yes.
Considering all the pictures that I saw on Facebook from like his various like church functions, he seems completely wasted all the time.
Yeah.
His liver must look like a sponge. Just Swiss cheese. How does
More
he
like
do
a
it?
basketball.
Yes.
So, yeah, we did 1 episode already about this guy. His name is Stojilko Kajević. He's an Serbian Orthodox priest born in 1937 in Yugoslavia. And then as an anti-communist, who was annoyed by the Titoist regime and apparently was repressed a little bit as a kid for going to the church too much and so on, decided to leave and live in the West in 1963, and then became a part of a extreme Serbian nationalist right-wing anti-communist faction of the diaspora and one of the leaders of a terrorist group.
Mm-hmm.
that we refer to as SOPO because that's the acronym for its Serbo-Croatian name, which means Serbian Liberation Movement Fatherland when you translate it. But I kind of failed to mention that they actually use a completely different name when they refer to their group in English.
Oh.
So in English, they call it something completely different, which is Freedom for the Serbian Fatherland. That's the name they
Freedom
use.
for the
I don't know. I think we should
Fatherland.
keep doing SOPO because
For
SOPO is easier
Yes.
to say.
Yeah.
Better than
Sure.
Fusuf. Yeah.
Yes. So, Father Kajević is not only like a kind of alcoholic, clownish terrorist that we covered quite substantially in the last episode, and there are various comedic terrorist actions that they did, mostly drunk.
Uh-huh.
He's also like a doctor of philosophy, and he likes to remind you of that often.
I'm a doctor of philosophy, goddammit.
Yes.
Did you mention that he also plotted to kill Tito?
Oh yeah, that's their obsession. Yes.
Yeah.
They had a few drunken attempts to kill Tito that didn't go well.
Yes. Yeah, stopped by some rando in a bar once, as far as I remember.
Yes. That apparently everyone in the diaspora knew that they were attempting to kill Tito.
Yeah.
And the FBI knew as well. Basically, everyone knew.
I'm trying to kill Tito, but I'm puking because I've been drinking Slevo for the last 12 hours.
Yes.
Schlevo?
No, not even Slevo. It's Slevo.
Slevo.
If you spent any amount of time in the Serbian American community, it's always Slevo.
Uh-huh.
So in the last episode, we kind of followed his career, and I think until 1977, when he was arrested in Manhattan for plotting to bomb a hotel where a Yugoslav state celebration was supposed to happen. I think in Chicago, like organized by the Yugoslav embassy. So they were planning to kill a lot of people there, even civilians and so on. And they had an infiltrator in their group who worked for the FBI, although they claimed that he worked also, that guy, for the Yugoslav state security, UDBA, that he was kind of a double agent for the FBI and UDBA as well. That's their claim. And also they think that he was the guy who murdered their like propaganda chief in the group, Dragiša Kašiković, who was like brutally murdered. I think just before that, stabbed that like 50 times along with his like stepdaughter who was 9. Yes, the informant like taped 90 hours of conversations with them plotting this hotel, and Father Kajević explicitly, talking about different ways they can do it and so on.
Yeah.
So they were arrested by the FBI.
No.
Together with Nikola Kavaja and Boško Radonjić, who are really amazing characters that we'll have to talk about more in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we now pick up there, more or less, where we left him, but now using a different book, which is a novel, like an autobiographical novel that Father Kajević wrote, and it's in English and published. It was published in England actually in the early 2000s. It's called Criminals and Demigods, and it's not a great novel, but I mean you can read it, but it's like not pretty badly written, kind of in moments like comical, very repetitive in the kind of phrases that he uses. Like the whole novel is structured as a conversation with some other guy. And in which and then Father Kajević kind of recounts what happened in the past and his prison experience and so on. The form of the conversation is very repetitive, and there's very kind of weird formulations where the guy who's kind of basically interviewing Father Kajević often says like, "Sorry for interrupting, please continue." And then Father Kajević says, "No problem," and then continues talking. And that repeats many, many times.
But the guy doesn't exist, right?
The guy doesn't exist. He's like yes.
So it's basically My Son Hunter.
Yes.
Just a long.
Except, I mean, he does, like, it's a much more dynamic book than that. movies because he actually talks about the
Oh,
years that
thank
he
God.
spent in a prison, which
Okay.
lots of shit happened there. It's
Mm.
not only a conversation, but
Okay.
yeah. And you can see that this book, unlike the previous one, had many editors because there's like significantly less mentions of what they are drinking on every page. Although there's quite a lot of that as well.
Mm.
Like the guy, when he meets him, he always brings some, like a bottle of wine or something else when they start their conversation. But there's less of that than in the last book.
Mhm.
So so this is like the present in the novel is like after I guess it's the 90s, something like this. So it is after Father Kajević was released from prison, and he has like a job. He's like a philosophy professor at the DePaul University. Like
Oh,
I think he
damn.
teaches ethics. Yes.
Awesome.
What the fuck?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
My ethics professor just came out of prison for, trying to
Yes.
kill Tito. And
So when is it okay to stab a dog in the face, Professor?
Well, when you're fighting repression,
Right. Yes.
in the heart. It's not in the face. It's in the heart.
On the
It was
heart,
like
right.
an old
the ethical place.
Chetnik. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, the book that I have, it has it's signed by Father Kajević. It has it's a book that he
Ray visited him.
gave
there.
as a present to like a student. It says like there's a date there, and his signature, and it says to this person, like one of the best students in my ethics class.
damn.
But
Man.
Father Kajević is like very confused about ethics and logic and like lots of stuff, like as we will see. And actually what he believed. He believes in interesting things, but like he's also kind of changes like the way he defines them, or sometimes on the same page. What he thinks about the state, repression, and so on. But it's very interesting. So the kind of the way it's structured is like he's okay. So he's living his like kind of modest life as a free man, teaches ethics and whatever. And then he's like followed around by this guy, like this weird younger guy who follows him around for a few days, and then Father Kajević is like sick of that. So of course he still has his Walther 37 automatic gun there. And so he grabs the guy and threatens him with his gun. And he's like, "What the fuck are you, following me around?" And the guy says, "I am Thomas O'Neill, a former FBI agent. My father was Charles O'Neill, the FBI agent that was working on your case." And Father Kajević is like, "No, I don't believe you. It's not possible. You're not his son." And so on. So apparently Charles O'Neill was like one of the good FBI agents that was on his case, who was kind of sympathetic to him.
Yeah, the guy that talked to the cops for him when they pulled him over for drunk driving.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
So Thomas O'Neill explains to him, and he's always Thomas O'Neill, never Tom O'Neill, that he lost his job because of Father Kajević. And he explains it that like he was very curious about his case when he worked in the FBI. Especially because there was this connection of his father with him and so on. So he read his file, and it's like 3,000 pages in that file for Father Kajević in the FBI. And then they warned him, don't read Father Kajević's file. And he said, "Okay, I won't." But then secretly continued to read it, and this is why he was fired. Because it's, very, heavy stuff there. So now he wants, he's desperate to talk with Father Kajević. It's not really clear why, but it seems that he admires him, and he says. So this is, of course, Father Kajević telling himself this. That his case is absolutely unique because, like, who else is a terrorist and a priest and a philosopher like him? And so he basically is very curious about what he has to say, and is begging him, like, "Please talk to me. Like, I want to hear your story and thoughts."
God, this sounds familiar somehow. What does this remind me of?
It's to me like really maybe because my brain is broken. but it reminds me a lot of like writings by the Order of Nine Angles and David Mamet, especially
Yes.
the autobiographical things that he wrote somehow.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
And-
Yes. Because
Yeah.
that's what it reminds me of. It reminds me of the guys that David Mamet makes up to review his work.
Yes,
Right.
That's what
yes,
it
yes.
reminds me. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But like Kajević actually lived that life, whereas
Yes.
David Mamet,
That's
Yes.
true.
not so much.
Yeah,
Not so much.
yeah. Kajević, yes, he basically maybe he lies here and there a little bit, or maybe even substantially, but he was a drunken terrorist who was in prison.
Point Kajević.
Yes. So, they decide they will meet the two of them, and basically Kajević will become some kind of a mentor and teacher. Basically, he almost frames it like that to the guy, and they will meet every Friday and talk. Eventually, Tom O'Neill's wife will join them as well, called Mary. She's like portrayed as a fragile woman, although Tom O'Neill claims that she's a tough cookie, a quote, but often she's like so disturbed by the things that Father Kajević says that she has to vomit.
So occasionally in the book, they stop
Yes,
talking to
she's-
allow his wife to vomit.
Yes, that happens. Yes.
Uh,
Maybe it's all the the like rakia, whatever they're drinking. I think it's probably that. But okay.
Slevo,
Yes.
you gotta get with the lingo.
Yeah. Sorry. So one of the first questions on the first Friday they would meet is like, Thomas asked Father Kajević, "Tell me, how did you meet this glamorous conservative lady, Kathleen Thatcher?" So this idea, as much as like the last book we reviewed has like this drinking and like throwing canisters of gasoline into windows of like Yugoslav diplomats. This kind of one of the main themes of this book is how Father Kajević is like completely irresistible to women,
okay.
and there is like throughout the book there's a bunch of them who are like madly in love with him.
Of course.
And yes, and he likes even some of them, although he clearly despises at least one of them. But okay, so this is like this Kathleen Thatcher which is like not a real name, but probably based on a real person, is like basically his love. And but it's interesting, like Father Kajević never mentioned his wife. Like in the previous book, I think he just mentions that he had a wife when he, and that I think
Right, I was about to say, is he married?
well, he's a priest. He has to be married, like in the Serbian Orthodox Church. But maybe I don't know. Maybe she died or whatever. I don't know. But she's never mentioned. He mentions that he has a son only when he says that his 16-year-old son died in a car accident a year after he was let out of the prison. That's what he says about his son, and about the wife, nothing. And he lives alone, clearly. So, but Kathleen is she's like a star of the American conservative movement. Okay, so both Kathleen and Father Kajević personally know Ronald Reagan. Like this is like mentioned, and met him a few times and so on. And while he's in prison, she meets Reagan, and he's like, "Oh, how is our Father Kajević doing?" Reagan is asking, like, we must pray for our Father Kajević.
So wait, Reagan is also friends with King Leka the First of Albania at this time.
Yes,
as well.
there will be more connections.
Who gifted him a baby elephant for the
Yes.
GOP party.
Yes. So Father Kajević was
Just being clear.
yeah,
Insane.
Father Kajević was a part of Reagan's campaign, like an active member of it. I think I'm not sure if it's like for governor or presidential award, but just before he went to prison. And he's also a member of the board of the American Conservative Union, which is and Kathleen is like one of the leaders of it. And I from what I understand, that's the organization that organizes CPAC.
Oh yeah,
They're like the organizers of that.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like he has a role in the American conservative movement in the right wing there as well.
Yeah, clearly.
Yes. So before they start this conversation, and he explains how he met Kathleen and so on, it is important for him to they establish that, like, he asks Thomas if he agrees that any act of terrorism, even by the government, is evil. And he insists on now he's kind of reformed, although he goes back and forth on that, if violence is allowed or not. But he always insists that the government is doing terrorism as well, and he insists on this that there is legal terrorism and illegal terrorism, and both are bad.
Okay.
And the guy says okay, whatever, okay, let's. I guess I agree or something like this.
I mean, I have to. You're writing my dialogue.
Yes, yes. So he's also these are his confused political ideas. He says that he always believed the United States are the only place on the globe that could resemble kind of a God's promised land or something like this. But they never were able to do that because they were always kind of prevented by corrupt politicians. So that's who put their own interests above the interests of the population or something like that. But so this is I'm only mentioning this because he will also say very different things.
Right.
So he met Kathleen on a cocktail party, in one of the congressional buildings, and so he was introduced to her by James March, who was the aide to Senator Jesse Helms. Which we mentioned before, that guy. He in the previous book, Kajević mentioned how he attended some dinner party were organized by the parents of this James March guy, aide to Jesse Helms. And he and Kathleen quickly became intimate. That's what he says. But he never really explained. He tells us that their relationship was platonic, but he kind of also wants us not to believe it, I would say.
Okay.
So he was hitting it too, and
yeah. I mean, he never says that.
I'm a priest.
Yes, I mean, you will see. So she says that she was kind of a princess of the American conservative movement, and that she was groomed for a top political office, something like that. Also, her father was a CIA guy, high up in the CIA, and she as well was a consultant for the CIA. But Kajević says that somehow he didn't know that at the time, which I don't believe him. So at some point, Kajević said something like, "Well, I had this lifelong dream about, top, ousting Tito from Yugoslavia, something like this. But maybe it was like a pipe dream or something like this." And then his alter ego, Thomas O'Neill, says, "No, it wasn't just wishful thinking. You were the real deal." And then explains how the State Department had to imprison him because they knew that basically Yugoslavia will dissolve after Tito died, and there was a real danger that Father Kajević would be in Milosevic's place and will take power in Serbia. And they are basically certain of that. That would happen, and this would really disrupt their foreign policy goals. So they had to imprison. And so this theory is often repeated throughout the book,
So Father Kajević would come back to Serbia and get elected.
Yes, he would be Milosevic,
instead of Milosevic.
Yes, but with a much better political goal, and he would be it would be a huge setback for the American foreign policy, which we don't know why. Why would this be a setback? This member of the Republican Party, friend of Ronald Reagan. Okay, why is this a setback for the U.S. policy? What's the problem there? I don't get it, and he never explains it. So, and Father Kajević indeed confirms to his alter ego how he did have such a plan. And he, not only did he have this fanatical group in the United States of his followers who were ready to do anything that he told them, he also had a solid group inside of Yugoslavia, and they were ready to take power in case of collapse. But he says the State Department, the FBI, and the CIA were faster than we were, and they just arrested him. Also, Kathleen was involved with a Rothschild man, and but Father Kajević was not jealous, and in fact, he encouraged her to be congenial with this Rothschild guy. We don't know why he did that, but it upset Kathleen very much when he did that, and she was very hurt that he was saying that, and I don't know why he was saying that, but
because he's like poly. Or...
I guess yes. I mean, he doesn't explain these things. I think maybe he thought it would be good for her career or something like this. I don't know. So he was seeing her 3 times per week. They would have dinners in Washington D.C. and so on. And basically, so the thing is that Thomas O'Neill, because he read these 3,000 pages of files about Kajević, he also knows many of these things, so he also adds to the narrative, And he says like, yes, I know she was crazy about you, and this really, upset the CIA and the FBI. They were very concerned that this woman is like so much in love with Father Kajević.
I see.
He was arrested in Manhattan, and as you mentioned, in this version, he calls Boško Radonjić Bako, and Kavaja is Jimo for some reason.
Nice.
Although he also gives Kavaja's real name later on. In the book, his father Stone, but then he also says that his real name is Kajević. So I'm not sure what's going on there with those double names.
Yeah, there's something weird about Serbian Americans and an obsession with the name Stone too. The guy that is like the chairman of the Serbian American Federation or Serbian National Federation for many years is Bob Stone.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, yeah.
Who's also like Radomir fucking Stanojević or some shit.
Yeah. So there was also like this 4th mysterious man there who kind of escaped. The 3 of them were arrested. Some others were arrested later, but there was like a mysterious 4th man. And this reminds me of the guy, his secret guy, military guy who was supposed to kill Tito with a sniper, but somehow someone failed. And this is the guy that no one knows about. And so he mentions again, this is like some kind of a special Rambo or like a Rambo guy. He even mentions how he had a few guys who was like as good as Rambo was. He explicitly says that he were like his secret guys that no one knew about. But this one was like especially like special. And then Thomas O'Neill says, yes, that person. He reminds me of the terrorist, the jackal. Like he's like that type of a guy. So we don't know what reminds him of the jackal, because we don't know anything about this guy, but okay, that's so when he's arrested, he's flown to Chicago, where the trial is supposed to happen, because that's where their secret meetings plotting the terrorist action were happening. And Father Kajević like immediately loses his mind when he's arrested, and he says so. Like he's like cursing God in his cell for being imprisoned, like basically on his first night in the cell, which is kind of
fuck you, God.
Yes, literally kind of things like that. Yes, which is like you will see that it will be he has, because he's also like into Dostoevsky and people like losing their faith and so on. So he uses that as a way to discuss the nature of faith, God, and so on. Okay. But immediately he's like basically fuck you, God. Like as soon as he's arrested.
Oh, I have to go to prison because I planned some terrorist actions.
yeah. So the first time, how many like attempts and crimes had he committed up to this point? Yes, and then the first time he has to deal with any hardship coming from any of that, he becomes an atheist immediately,
and hates God. Yes.
Yeah.
And
wow.
And so even his alter ego says something like, well, didn't you expect that you would get arrested? Like, what's going on there? And he says to himself, of course, but I never believed that I would be set up and accused of being a terrorist. So this is like very confusing, because he insists that he was set up and that there were some false accusations there. Although he never says like, I mean, how are they false? Because like he clearly says in the other book, especially, they were like plotting to put a bomb in that place, kill a bunch of people.
Yeah.
But I think he thinks that like using an informant is just not fair, and that like he was set up, so that hurts his feelings. And that's like the injustice of that broke.
Not fair.
He says. Yes.
Somebody snitched, which for a priest should be I guess, normal.
Yeah. It's called confession.
Yeah. You have to do it.
Yeah.
To take communion.
So in Chicago, he's imprisoned in the MCC, which is, I guess, stands for Metropolitan Correctional Center. I guess.
Okay.
So a big prison there. And his nights there were like nightmarish. He was like he also was very hurt by the way he was treated, by the state and also by the media. They humanized him to the point of no return or something like this.
Right.
So they were accused of organizing 19 bombings of diplomatic centers and conspiracy to assassinate the president of a friendly country, and also transportation of explosives, which he himself confirmed that that's what they were doing. And so the DA said that there's like, if he was found guilty, he would get like 150 years of prison or something like this. So he, in his cell, he says he was condemning God for his downfall and cursing God because that he was the maker of, his destiny, which is like, how did you get that idea?
No.
So he had this attorney that he calls Mr. Menton, who was hired by his brother Zhivkov, also a priest. And he told him, that this informant was called, I think, Bogoje Panayotović, collected 90 hours of taped conversations from their secret meetings. And, they're pretty much fucked. And he also now uses these meetings with Thomas O'Neill to, discuss his ideas about the government. So Thomas asked him something like, so you said you think that the government is the oppressor? And then, then Kajević tries to kind of explain his views, we are very confused about his ideas about what is oppression and so on.
Uh-huh.
So he goes back and forth between mostly two things. One is that, like every government is oppressive. They only differ with, by the degree and severity of their oppression. So, of course, Stalin and Mao were the worst oppressors in history. But then he gives like other examples. He says priests can also be very oppressive. And then he gives a curious example. Like, for example, but then when they refuse to give you communion if you're divorced, like that's like extremely oppressive.
Huh.
Then he says cops in the streets are also very oppressive. They can like ruin the lives of people and so on. And except like in the case if they're like fair and like just men, something like that. But so that's like, okay, so, what are you saying there, really? Then he says, IRS is also oppressive, sir. But so he gives like then two definitions of oppressors. They're different, basically on the same page almost. The first one is like whoever has power over you and has no virtue of justice and kindness is the oppressor. Okay, that's one idea. But the other one is everyone who has power to control the size of your daily bread and your freedom is the oppressor. So these are different things. The other one is like almost anarchist, like it's like a structural thing. If you hold some power, you're the oppressor. The first one says like if you hold power but also are like unjust and have no virtue, which is like a different thing.
Right.
And
yeah.
So, but he's confused between these two options.
Yeah.
But somehow doesn't realize that.
But these are things that he arrives at after he goes to prison, right?
Yes. This is something that he says, in the present of the book while talking to Thomas O'Neill. So this is like after his prison experience. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but this oppression was so severe. I mean, I'm not okay. I don't want to make like okay. He was like imprisoned. Okay, he was like on the other side of oppression, but still, they like would they let him go on bail. Okay. Before the trial started. So, like his brother, Father Zhivko, like posted bail for him because he like took a loan and just gave them the money, and he was out before the trial started. And when he was leaving, he pledged that he would never go back to prison and that he would do whatever he needs to do to not go back to that hellish place. So this
except not planning to blow up a bunch of people.
Yes. Well, he actually stopped doing that.
Did he? Okay.
Yes. And he says that he's against that, kinda. I mean,
Kind of.
sorta. Depends on what page of the book you're reading.
I like blowing people up, but I hate going to prison.
Yes.
So I guess I'm against it.
Yes. So this is now he's free on bail, and he starts plotting how to escape.
Okay.
So he has to report to the FBI every day in person, and his movements are restricted within the boundaries of Cook County, and he's under 24-hour surveillance. But he wants to escape. He says, "Okay, for escaping, I need two things. One is courage. I have that. The other is money. I don't have.
I've got a whole bottle of courage."
Yes, yes, exactly. So he says that he needs around $200,000 to escape. Mostly because he wants to pay back the money that his brother took on a loan, because he basically would lose his house, if Father Kajević just escapes, something like this. So now we are introduced to another woman who just adores Father Kajević. This is the enigmatic Mrs. Sefferson, who's like a wealthy lady from Newport Beach, California. Later, he tells us that she trades diamonds.
Oh.
So she, adores him. We don't know exactly how he knows her. But she was organized. She lives in California, and she is like a part of high society there. So he actually gets a permit for from the judge to travel to California and to raise money for his defense. And so he goes to this Mrs. Sefferson there. So when he lands in LA, her limo driver is waiting for him, and she reserved a beautiful suite for him overlooking the Pacific Ocean in a club which is called Balboa. So it's a fancy club that he lives in. And he's looking around, and it seems to him that there are no FBI agents there at all. And Thomas O'Neill confirms, yes, that's true, because my father was in charge of the, I don't know, California FBI or something like this. And he deliberately didn't put any agents on you because he wanted you to escape. Because he was disgusted by the way that the state treated. And also, his father, Charles O'Neill, the FBI agent, was aware, and this is the second connection to the King Leka story. He was aware that Father Kajević has close connections to the governments of Rhodesia and South Africa, and that he knows some of their diplomats who would help him escape and give him asylum. And that's what they were hoping that he will do.
Okay.
I would actually love it if King Leka had a relationship to Father Kajević. It wouldn't surprise me, given the history of the Serbian and Albanian ruling classes to collaborate over certain things, and it would only make sense that in exile maybe these kind of factions would meet up.
Yeah, and they're also both of them are members of the same kind of international anti-communist movement.
Right. Exactly.
So yeah.
Just for listeners, King Leka is in episode 147, Zog's Wild Wacky Adventures. If you want a good time, check that one out.
So it is one of the more wacky, one of the wackier episodes.
Oh, definitely.
We've had.
Yes.
Well, I think he and Kajević have a lot in common as far as wackiness goes.
Yes. So Mrs. Sefferson, of course, left a car for him to use, and he at one point he drove towards the Mexican border, but then changed his mind because he was thinking oh, my poor brother, he will lose a house. Before I escape, I need to get money, from Mrs. Sefferson, who basically wants to give him money. But there is this weird conflict now that will happen, which is pretty strange. And so he comes back, to Club Balboa, and because he can't condemn his brother and his children to being homeless, basically. And so Mrs. Sefferson meets him there now, and she is just adores him, calls him darling all the time, and she asks him hey, are you ready for tonight's dinner party and so on? And he just hates her. She's getting on his nerves, and he's why are you calling me darling all the time? And he's just rude to her. To this rich woman who trying to help him. And so they go to this dinner party, and it's a big event, there's a stage there, and she's asked to address the audience. I'm not sure if she receives some prize or something like this, but she pledges some money, $25,000 that evening for a children's memorial hospital in LA or something like this. And when she finishes her speech, she is like walking back to sit next to Father Kajević at their table, but then she slips and falls down like on her back, and is like totally embarrassed laying down there. And she's like asking for help from Father Kajević, and she's like, "Darling, give me your hand, please. Help me get up." But he, because he hates her for some reason that he doesn't explain, he's like just ignoring her and like looking at the ceiling and smoking his pipe, and like just doesn't want to help her at all.
Well, that's not the right Christian thing to do.
No, but he says like, I told her not to drink, and like she's
Oh,
like
come
hammered.
on.
Yes,
Please,
yes.
that guy tells someone not to drink.
Yeah, that's the only person ever that he told not to drink. And like, and she's like,
because she's a woman.
Yes, exactly. So and he's like, I told her not to drink, and now she's like lying there drunk, and he writes something like, now she was paying the price for like not
Oh my
listening to
God.
me,
This is
or
his
something
own
like
account of himself.
Yes.
That's
And
That's
so
something.
she, somehow manages to get up by herself and walk there and sit next to him, and she's crying, and he's like, this, like, he thinks that somehow he's right about this. So like a woman sitting at the table next to them is like, he's disgusted by his behavior, and she tells him something like, "You bastard, if you were my date, like it would be your last night with me," or something like this. And Father Kajević replies to this woman like, "You're absolutely right. It would be your last time in my company as well," something like that. Because I think he thinks that like it's her fault that she got drunk, and like
Right.
he doesn't explain it, but I guess the problem is that she's a woman, because all of his friends are hammered, and he himself all the time,
Right.
But I guess that's what's going on.
No,
there.
no, she's a woman. It's just disgraceful, and
Yes.
yeah.
right.
By the way, he's on bail, looking at wife, 150 years of prison, and this is the person trying to help him and give him a lot of money, and so this is the way he treats her for unknown reason. Okay, but she, so they spend the rest of the evening, and she's still kind to him and so on. But when they get back to the club where he's staying, she starts crying, and she tells him like, "Why are you such a cruel man? I love you. Don't you see it?" And so on. "Why are you treating me like this?" And he explains how she's hysterical and so on. So what does he do? He's trying to push her out of his room, and he's pushing her out of the room, but she somehow manages to stay in the door, and for some time she's crying and telling him these things, and then after a few hours or something like this, she leaves him there, and he falls asleep. And tomorrow she reappears, and she's apologizing and saying like, "I'm sorry for my behavior, like I want to help you," and so on. And she's like, "Don't be mad, like I know that you need money, but the thing is, FBI is monitoring my accounts, and I can't just give you money." But what I forgot to tell you is that when they were on their way to the dinner party, she took him to like some kind of a jewelry, like a place where like diamonds and expensive things are being sold, and she was trying to make him allow her to buy him a ring, which was like worth $75,000, which he refused, and then she kind of persuaded him to take like a watch, an expensive watch or something like this. So I think she was clearly trying to give him money in some way, but I think he's not getting that. Like that, he wants to give him like an expensive thing that he can sell and use that money for whatever he wants. But he's too dumb to understand that, I think. Even
She's
when
like, "I'm trying to buy you some stuff so you could do your terrorism, honeys."
Yes, or like escape, or like whatever.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing didn't work out. And he flew back to Chicago, and his poor brother Živko is picking him up at the airport. He's kind of pissed off and kind of in a bad mood that he didn't, manage to escape and so on and get some money. But Živko is still like, "Okay, we'll think of something. We'll find another solution." Then there's like a thing that repeats is that like the FBI is sending provocateurs at him. So there is this guy who like wants to meet him, like that he knows from church, that he wants to meet him in a like a library. And then when Father Kajević meets him, this guy's like telling him, you need to escape here, use this money. But there are FBI agents there, like waiting for him to accept the money and try to escape, to arrest him. So he refuses that. And this kind of thing happens over and over again.
Sure.
And then we are reminded that the state really wants him in prison for a long time so that he wouldn't get into power in Yugoslavia.
Right.
And this is like always repeated.
Wait, so he really thinks he would have like replaced Tito or Milosevic or something? Like
Milosevic, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Man.
So there is another idea. Now there is so the American Conservative Union that he's on the board of is organizing their annual conference in Washington, D.C., which I guess is CPAC, I think. He doesn't call it that, but I guess so. And he has an invitation to attend. So, of course, he gets permission from the judge to go to D.C., but his idea is to use that time to, visit his friend, who he calls, like, Mr. Kenneth, who is a South African diplomat. Okay. And so he wants to use that opportunity to somehow get some kind of asylum in South Africa. Immediately when he arrives to Washington, D.C., another woman that he knows from before, who is his admirer, called Nancy Taylor. And then he always describes these women, beautiful blondes with baby blue eyes and silver hair and such things. Yes. Contacts him, and she said that always when they met, she was like an admirer of his anti-communist militancy and so on. And she also has a CIA connection, but his lawyer really warns him about her and says that she's like basically working for the CIA, FBI, and the Treasury Department as an entrapper. And so he avoids her and doesn't go to this meeting with her that she wants to. But on previous occasions, she would even offer him to give him like some explosive devices constructed by the CIA that are like, it's like James Bond shit. Like it looks like a pencil or something like this. She was offering these things to him.
So not just cluster munitions.
I guess so. Yeah. He, of course, meets his, love Kathleen there, who was a keynote speaker at, I guess, CPAC that evening. But they meet, and then he kind of bumps her out because he's very, like, nihilistic, He's like, okay, I have no chance. I will go to prison. I will rot there or something like this. And she's very upset by this way of thinking. And then she says something to him like, okay, even if you go to prison for a long time, I will wait for you. It's like a strange thing, like, because they have a platonic relationship. So, like, what does that mean? Like, she won't do platonic stuff with other men while he's in prison? Or, like, I don't know. Okay. Okay. So, the next morning, so he's still in Washington. He kind of secretly goes out of the hotel where he is based and use like a side emergency exit, then runs through some forest, catches a taxi, and tries to visit his friend, Mr. Kenneth from South Africa. But when he arrives there, his house is surrounded by FBI agents, so he's fucked. And he goes back to the hotel. The FBI is following him around everywhere. And, tomorrow he goes back to Chicago. And now again, Živko is, waiting him there to pick him up in the car, now in a very bad mood. They don't even talk while they drive home. So he's kind of desperate, And the trial starts. He didn't manage to escape. So also later he found out that his attorney actually was working for the feds because he was a former federal prosecutor and wanted him to go to jail again for the same reason, so that he wouldn't become next Milosevic.
Right. Everybody's super concerned with that. Clearly,
yes. Well, they all work for the State Department.
Yeah.
The lawyer fucked him over because he made him not accept a guilty plea that was, and they heard that the judge in that case, he just pleaded guilty, would give him 3 to 5 years of prison, something like this. So it was probably a good deal, but the attorney was like, no, you shouldn't do that. And then Thomas O'Neill says something. Yes, that was the key. The classified documents that I saw clearly stated that if you were like free during the collapse of Yugoslavia, your group had the best chance to take over the power, and then the U.S. government would never accept such a thing. Like why, we don't know. Like never explained.
Yeah.
Thomas O'Neill also tells him like the FBI also feared that you had like people on the outside who were ready to do anything you told them to do. And Father Kajević to that says like, well, that means that they had a really good idea of like my organization. Like I had like fanatical basically followers who no one knew about, and then he says they were as good as Rambo, something like this. But I decided like to use them in a more crucial time, not now. And anyway, I didn't want to create a bloodshed in downtown Chicago during the trial, So he just
hold me back,
like
hold me
from
back.
the goodness of
Yes. Man, good thing you were there, man. Otherwise,
exactly,
I would have kicked their
Crazy.
ass.
Yeah,
exactly.
Do you think maybe the idea is that could it at all relate maybe to like the shit that Slobodan Drašković was saying about how the U.S. is like secretly Titoist and stuff like that, and that's why they wouldn't accept Kajević as the next?
Well, this is like this is when this period is when Kajević's brain is breaking in different ways. Okay, so he's already not clearly just an anti-communist. Now he's more going into this never explained idea that the U.S. is just against Serbs somehow, even if they're not communists. So that is going on, but also other things, But he never really explains it. Like, what's the problem with him being in power in Serbia for Americans? Like, there's never any attempt of explaining that. It's only repeated like 100 times, but never explained. So the Thomas O'Neill asked him like, so these your special guys, are they around? And Father Kajević says, no, they are nowhere near here or anywhere in this country. They are where they need to be. Which I think he's probably saying that they are like in the Yugoslav war. They're participating or something. I don't know. I don't know where they need.
Well,
to be.
when was that interview from?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure. Like, I guess it's set in the 90s because it was published in the early 2000s. So I guess it's the conversation is going on in the 90s, I suppose. Father Kajević really doesn't like people. I mean, sometimes he's not like a complete misanthrope, but sometimes he does sound a bit like that. He has like a better side. You will see that to him, a more kind of humanitarian one. But like when he describes, the courtroom, he says it was packed with the general mob, legal scum, and some random spectators. So the categories there are random spectators, and then the general mob, which is a different thing, and legal scum there as well.
Right.
Randos, mob, scum.
Yes.
That's everybody.
So everyone was very nervous during this trial, especially the state, because this was the first federal trial in Chicago that was about terrorism. When he saw a big sign that says the trial in the courtroom, the United States versus Reverend Stone, he was like very upset when he saw that. Like, so what? I'm like alone fighting against the United States, and to think, that I came to this country, and then I even volunteered to fight together with the American boys in Vietnam, he says. And this phrase is like repeated, I think at least 4 times, and it's always exactly the same. Volunteered to fight in Vietnam. He never said I fought in Vietnam. He always says I volunteered to fight. Which I think means that he didn't fight.
To anyone who would listen.
Yeah. Yes.
Everyone at the bar.
But he wants unlike Leka, who was there as some sort of like advisor.
Yeah. So he's also a bit that kind of a guy. He wants you to think that he fought there, but he's technically not lying.
Right.
Right.
So the star witness at this trial was this guy, the informant, and it was just like very hurtful. This whole trial for him, he was so disappointed by the lies and the setup and the feds who were lying, and like you don't know what the lies were. That never explains. But it completely, scarred him and ruined his childhood dreams about the land of freedom and justice. He was found guilty on all counts. And they locked him up in solitary confinement, and he completely flipped out again. He was at night. He said he was shouting like Nietzsche's madman, cursing God for the cruelty that he does even to those who believe in him. Yes. Then there was like these kind of tortured philosophical conversations between the two of them. So I skipped most of them, but they are like kind of sometimes funny and a bit strange. There is some obsession with animals and comparing men with animals in a strange way. So Thomas O'Neill says something like, "Don't you think that man hates his fellow man more than animal hates other animals?" Something like this. Like, it's like, what? Like, how do animals hate animals? Like, what are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
this doesn't make any sense. Like,
well, that's the nature of the world, don't you know?
Yes.
Animals hate just how it is.
Man hates man, and animal hates animals.
Giraffe hates penguin. It's the law of nature.
Yeah, exactly. So very confusing for like an ethics professor. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
What did he teach?
Yeah. I don't know. So, but he also says, how some good things came out of this. Like, without this trial, he says basically not in that words, but like a mundane life. I would just. He says I would be like most people. I would be working, making daily bread, sleeping, and once in a while having some fun. And that's not what a human life should be. Man doesn't live by bread alone. And human beings has to, have a higher agenda than animals do. Again, animals don't really have an agenda, but okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The old animal agenda again.
Yes, the low agenda of animals. And so, he also now talks a little bit about his, views of the state government and so on. So, Father Kajević states to, Agent Thomas O'Neill how governments, democratic or tyrannical, really, they only kind of like, and also that in a very hypocritical way, the law-abiding citizens. Mm-hmm. And though he says those who nourish slave mentality, which is a disgrace for human nature. And then he says, so this is very interesting for a Christian priest. So as an example, he mentioned his mother. And so his mother was like kind of always was unhappy that he was making trouble, and it and was teaching him that silence is a virtue and that he should like not stir trouble all the time. And then he says, my mother is a true Christian soul, a law-abiding citizen, and a perfect subject for slavery. The oppressors love people like my mother, and they praise their weakness as something good, because they can be manipulated. But he does call her like a true Christian soul, and then says that this is like perfect material for slavery. So
very weird.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's going on there? And he has this like Nietzschean side, which also reminds me of Mayat, and he will explain more about that. But he also has this kind of more kind of libertarian, gentle side to him. So he, for example, criticizes punishing children as a way to teach them. He thinks that's very bad. That's also the cause of many evils. That you should like just be able to talk to children in a very open way and be there to listen to them and allow them to make mistakes and learn from them and not punish them and so on, which is okay. Interesting. And then so Thomas tells him something like, well, you shouldn't be mad at the DEA. He was just doing his job, something like this, which also at some point seems that Kajević would be of that opinion, but then Kajević insists, no, like his job is to must be based on truth and justice, something like that. So he's going back and forth, like, what's going on here? Like, do you believe in the state, or is it inherently oppressive? Like, I'm confused.
It sounds like it just depends on what they're doing to him specifically.
Yes. Yeah. No. So, he talks about the problems of state government, the way they treat citizens, what should be done, corruption, and so on. And then he mentions, as a good example, was very strange. He says, as a guy who has some wonderful solutions that I don't go into, and I think he doesn't as well, for like all of these problems of, has some brilliant ideas how to solve this problem. Is a law professor, a liberal. You know who that is? Alan Dershowitz.
No.
What?
Yes.
Okay.
Didn't expect that name.
Yes.
Interesting.
So he likes him. He thinks that he's a good, has good ideas how to solve many ethical problems concerning government, state, and so on.
Great.
He's like very pessimistic and kind of apocalyptical in his views of what future brings. So, and he thinks that governments will get more and more oppressive, the democratic ones as well, to the point that they will imprison millions and millions of people and will not even hesitate to use nerve gas and small nuclear weapons to suppress riots and dissent.
Okay.
So that's also there. And he has this, as I said, this Nietzschean outlook that I'll talk a little bit more about. He kind of sees people as, the weak and the strong. Like the weak and ignorant will hope and dream about freedom, while the brave and wise, when not in prison, they will actually act. They will take their destiny in their own hands, something like that. So even when he was locked up, in solitary confinement, there was some hope, because the poor, like Mrs. Jefferson, that he humiliated so much, came there and saw him and offered to like bail him out. Apparently, there was still an option for him to get bail, and she had like $500,000 with her there to pay to get him out of prison. And she told him, like, listen, we'll fight against this. We'll go to the Supreme Court if we have to. And then while explaining this, she used something like a phrase, I will take care of you, something like this, which completely triggered him. And he lost his mind and started shouting. And he was like, I will not be a possession of a wealthy lady, something like this.
That's yeah. Okay. Yeah. His psychologically, he's kind of coming together a little bit more here for me.
Oh, yeah. So he refused that and just went back to prison.
Yeah. Yes.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
I'm not coming out. You can't make me.
And then cursing God.
Yes. Yeah. Fuck you, God, for doing this to me.
Oh my God. For making me go back to prison because I tried to kill some people.
Yes.
Wow. Damn. Yes. Man.
So
he's a complex little boy, isn't he?
So I'm like approaching the end of this episode, but he casually mentions, like, I will come back to this, I think, in the next episode as well. He mentions how there were some ex-CIA men in prison with him. So he mentions this Luis guy who is an ex-CIA man, who was like a big drug dealer who like was basically dealing drugs for the CIA, and then also took some of it for himself. So ended up in prison.
Yeah, one for the doctor. Yeah.
Yeah. This guy was later in the Contras. I think he's from like Central America or something like this. So he's like one of his friends from prison. Then there is an other guy who's called Richard Duncan, who is a South African arms dealer, smuggler, who was in prison, and they were like all friends there. And when these two guys, the Luis, the ex-CIA drug dealer, and Richard Duncan, the South African arms smuggler, when they got out of prison, they kind of teamed up with a third guy who will also appear in this story throughout, and were smuggling plutonium out of the Soviet Union.
Damn.
That's, so what of this is fictional, I don't know, but that's what he's telling us. And the guy that they teamed up with is an ex-Green Beret called Burda, who's he's like that whole Burda thing is like a subplot in the novel that kind of drives the whole thing through, because Thomas O'Neill is the whole time is trying to get information of Burda because he's active in the present of the novel and smuggling plutonium and such things. But I'll get back. Burda is, by the way, a Lithuanian guy who hates Jews and is a racist, and is a son of Lithuanian SS guy and an ex-Green Beret. So these are his friends from prison.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So also he mentions the snitches and the provocateurs who were sent after him all the time in prison, trying to get him to try to escape, so that he would even get more prison time or get killed or something like this. All of this is orchestrated by the State Department, and he specifically
By the State Department.
Yes.
Okay.
And he specifically mentions Lawrence Rubin, the former U.S. ambassador in Belgrade, that he's the guy behind this attempt to get him even more prison time. We know why. Also, like an interesting thing happens at some point. This is all in Chicago, like in this MCC prison. Like a senior jail guard called Mr. Jameson, like at some point asked him to come to his office or something like this. And then Mr. Jameson is basically asking Father Kajević to become a snitch and to snitch on some black Muslims that he calls those animals. The guard does, jail guard does, because like they're under investigation and some are waiting for the trial. And like if you get us good information, we can get them more jail time.
Sure.
And Father Kajević like refuses this in disgust. Like this idea sickens him, he says. And he talks about it was a typical idea of an oppressor to try to use prisoners against other prisoners. And for me I just saw it was a fight between the oppressed and the oppressors, and I was one of the oppressed, and so were the black Muslims, so there was no way I would snitch on them. Which is interesting.
Yeah.
But maybe not so unusual for a prisoner. I mean, there is some kind of solidarity between all kinds of prisoners.
Yeah. I mean, always.
Yes.
Although, I mean, I guess, like, as a Chetnik, you might think that that he'd be closer with some of, like, the white power gangs and shit like that. Yeah.
So, there are, like, various adventures here, like people trying to murder him. So there is like of course there is another lady in the prison who is also very fond of him, a Janet, a beautiful blonde woman who is like
of course
in charge of like a Bible study program, who's very fond of Father Kajević. But there is this guy called Mad Chavez, who is like some murderer who's like into Janet. And so Mad Chavez threatens Father Kajević, and he's trying to impress Father Kajević by showing him his belly. Mad Chavez does, which has like many wounds, like he was stabbed many times or something like this. So this he threatens, and he's saying like, "She's my woman, stay away from her," something like this. But Father Kajević says something like, "But Chavez didn't know that I could be as vicious as any endangered animal again."
I thought we were supposed to be above animals.
I don't know. But he says Chavez didn't have a clue that where I came from, the only kind of fight that deserved respect was one of self-defense and of out of pride. And it usually ended in death, is what he said. So he says to Chavez, "Listen, pal, there's a lot of pal here in this book. Everyone addresses everyone with pal."
This is the 70s.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Hey, pal.
Yes.
Check it out, pal.
So he says, like, "Listen, pal, do whatever you have to do. But if you ever make a move on me, there will be no scars on your stomach to boast about. You will be dead." Okay?
It's a weird boast too, isn't it? Like showing somebody your stomach and being like, "People stab me regularly."
Yes.
I get stabbed all the time.
Yes. So this
and Father Kajević is like, "I'm in prison for fucking terrorism."
Yes. Exactly.
You talk to me the wrong fucking way, I'll fucking kill you.
God, poor Janet, man.
Well, yeah. So Chavez is impressed by this, so he moves away. He's they let him out of prison like soon after that, but he's gunned down somewhere. He's dead. But Janet is like she loses her job. Her Bible study program is abolished because she was too close to the prisoners, especially to Father Kajević. Which I don't know what happened there, but something happened. Okay, so we are near the end here. So of this episode, we'll have one more. So now we are now in 1979. Okay, Um,
1979.
yes. So, Father Kajević, still in prison in Chicago, was kind of chilling in the TV area there. And he saw on the news, someone saw something on the news, and they started shouting, "Hey, priest, look, there is a report on you on the TV," something like this. And he was confused and tried to look what's going on. But when he started watching, the guards grabbed him immediately and dragged him out of there. And he asked them what's going on. They said something to him like, "Shut up, you terrorist," something like this. So they drag him. They drag him to the third floor, which is like a infamous third floor of this prison, and it's infamous because this is where they have blackout cells, which he says is something that the government doesn't tell people it exists. So they put him in one of these blackout cells, so it's total darkness, and he doesn't see anything, and he basically has a panic attack and like cannot breathe, and is suffocating there in total darkness, doesn't see anything, and passes out and like laying down on a concrete floor he doesn't know for how long, until they open the door and like are laughing at him cruelly and saying like, "Oh, did you enjoy our cell?" something like this. So they pick him up and they give him like a clergyman's like suit for some reason to change, and they're saying like, "Okay, you need to go with us quickly, we're going to the O'Hare airport." So they go there and they tell him quickly, like on the way there, your co-conspirator, the guy that was on the trial with you, he was also out on bail. So this is that at the
Kavaya
time,
or who?
Kavaya, was out on bail. Although here he's referred to as Jimo. Okay, so Jimo is he hijacked a plane at the airport and has like 136 hostages and has dynamite and says that he will blow everything up until we immediately release you from prison. So that's his demand. And so Kajević.
That's one way to get out.
Yes.
Fuck.
Yes. So Kajević is like very shocked by this, and so they take him there. So there's like a mean woman from the FBI there who tries to interrogate him. There's also like some now they're having some kind of theological discussion there. The woman is like, "Well, the church teaches us that all government comes from God and should be obeyed, and therefore you should cooperate us," something like this. And Father Kajević totally doesn't believe this. He thinks that this is like total bullshit. Like you should not obey the government, and that's like some kind of stupid idea that like Peter had, and it's like doesn't make any sense and should be rejected. So they're doing that, and he refuses to talk to her, and she gets very frustrated with him. And at some point, they tell him that Kavaya wants to talk to him, so they take him to another room where there's many rows of TV monitors and about 24 of feds there, like monitoring the situation, what's going on, and so on. And after like about 2 hours of waiting, they hand him some receiver or to talk with Kavaya. So Kavaya, like we'll talk about him, but you can imagine him almost as being kind of a Luca Brasi type of character. Like
Absolutely, yeah.
And so Kavaya says something like this: "This is the terrorist Jimo. You are my chief, and I demand your immediate release and your freedom. If they don't bring you here, I will blow up the airplane." Okay. And so Father Kajević tells him like, "You are not a terrorist, Jimo. You're the father of 3 wonderful girls, like you're a good husband," something like this. And he talks. And he says something like, "I want you to release all the hostages, and like, thank you for your attempt to get me out of this hell, but I refuse to go anywhere by violent means. For now, this is the end of our struggle." And then the confused Kavaya tries to say something, but they take the receiver of Father Kajević and are like, feds are pissed off at him for saying that to Kavaya for some reason.
Why?
So I mean, this is like what a catastrophe, like for both of them. No,
Yes.
like this guy hijacked a plane to get him, and he's like, "No, don't do that. Like, let them go." And the other like guy is like, "You are my chief. Like I'm a terrorist, and you are the head of my terrorist organization."
Yes.
Like
Ixnay on the heroism day.
Yes. So okay. So basically, so his idea is that the feds were pissed off because they wanted him to be on the plot, so they could arrest them both and give them even more jail time, or to use this as an excuse to just kill them or something like this.
Yeah.
So they interrogate Father Kajević again, and they're trying to they're showing pictures of Kavaja on the plane, who's like strapped with dynamite, and they're trying to find out from Kajević, is this like real dynamite? Is this fake? Is what's going on there? And Father Kajević is like, I don't know if it's real or fake. I don't what do I know? I don't know. So they're very kind of.
But from what I understand, Kavaja was like beyond wasted on these things. I mean, like he was on like a 10-day bender there, like
for sure,
drunk as shit, like fucking completely fucking out of his mind.
I'm sure he was.
Liquored up. Yeah.
So we'll talk in more detail what happened with him on this occasion. So I won't say more about this, but he didn't kill any of those people. They were released eventually, and he was arrested. But this is like only days before they were supposed to get sentenced, like both of them and other people as well. So okay, they're not after this. They're going back to court to receive their sentence. Okay, and I think that the state is asking like 25 years for Father Kajević.
Mm-hmm.
And Father Kajević, like Kavaja gave a speech that Father Kajević said was ridiculous, that he said how he was proud of everything he did and he would hijack the plane again or something like this. But Father Kajević, he gives like this, philosophical speech, which is like very convoluted and doesn't make any sense. But he's very proud of it. And he says to the judge, and judge respects him and listens to him. And so he says to the judge that he doesn't blame anyone for what happened to him. It was all his fault. And he made 3 mistakes, and sometimes he also refers to them as sins. So, and he explains now what these 3 mistakes or sins are. So the first one is that he escaped from Yugoslavia. He abandoned his people. That was wrong. He was supposed to stay there and fight there. Which is like, okay, this sounds in some kind of honest self-criticism here. The first one. Then the other one is very different. His other mistake was his belief that the United States was kind of a leader in a fight against communism and any oppression. So that was his other sin. So he's basically saying US is shit, I'm okay, which is like whatever.
Right. Yeah.
And the third one is even kind of worse because there's total inconsistency in this, like how he defines his mistakes and or sins. So his third sin is that he's a perennial
attempted murder.
Perennial believer in freedom and justice for all people.
Oh,
that's
God.
his third sin. And in this, fight, he lost respect for any authority that suffocates truth and justice. And whatever I did sincerely and from my heart.
Oh.
So he got 12 years of prison after that speech, which he thinks it worked because the prosecution wanted 25, so the judge gave him less than half of that, and he thinks it was because of this speech.
Sure.
Because the judge said some good things about him.
But this is the same thing with like Ahmed Jarka, like like in all the Albanian like nationalist narratives, it's like, oh well, like the judge and like the jury had sympathy for him for murdering a guy, for disrespecting the flag.
Yeah,
you almost would call that kind of thing slave mentality, wouldn't you?
Yes. Yeah.
Hoping for the approval of the person who controls you.
Yeah.
Seems like. Didn't he say something about that?
Yeah. Well, he
who?
Now he continues saying things like that. Now to conclude with more of his views, more of his philosophy, let's say. This is also reminds me of Mayat. He says like maybe there is some truth in saying that suffering makes men stronger. Yet, suffering in itself should never be desired as an end in itself, But what Father Kajević believes is that suffering caused by the struggle for freedom and justice has nobility in its nature. And, it kind of widens our perception of life and expands our horizon, something like this. I think isn't like the ONA, they have this, like, how do they call it? Like learning from
Pathemathos.
Yeah, that's what Father Kajević is saying. And it's interesting now, he has also, like, I will end with his views on what terrorists are, which is like very, I think he kind of, one of the way he was broken by all of these contradictions that he experienced and the repression and everything, being kind of basically in a prison system, of America, that he saw as a leader of the fight against communist oppression and so on, created lots of confusion in him, and also like redefined what is he struggling for and against, because he was motivated as an anti-communist, and now he has to think of something else in some way, and it becomes very nihilist in a sense that, when you read someone like Myatt, and those people are nihilist in sense, like, they talk about struggle and some ideals of struggle and honor and such things, but they don't really, there's not much substance there. It's almost like it's not important what are you struggling for, but just that you're struggling in an honorable way, let's say.
Yeah.
And he kind of, Father Kajević kind of comes to that point. So, for example, he talks about terrorists. Okay, so he says there are normal and abnormal terrorists in a clinical way. He says. So the abnormal terrorists, they are like mentally ill people, and they are not real terrorists. He says that real terrorists are normal. Okay, and he's one of them. He's a normal terrorist, and normal terrorists in most cases are idealists, and they are people who struggle for social justice. So basically, social justice warrior, he says, are the normal terrorists, and he's one of them.
Yeah, why not?
Yes. And they say that they are passionately devoted to the betterment of life for all people. And most of them are against any oppression, be it domestic or foreign. So it's very strange how he just talks about terrorists in a very abstract way. Like, he doesn't even talk about any kind of political or any other content there. He just like talks about terrorists. And he sees himself as a normal terrorist who is an idealist. And there's nothing there, like no communism, capitalism, something. Just general struggle against oppression for the betterment of all humanity and social justice. Very strange. And he says, most normal terrorists, at first they try demonstrations and riots, but, when there are no more remedies for the state's terrorism, then they opt for violence. They fight against legal terrorism. And he basically thinks this is justified. Although he previously said that, all terrorism is bad, he thinks that it is justified, to use violence against the state when it's oppressive, which is always, I guess, or maybe not. I don't know.
Always or maybe not.
Yes.
Yeah, or not in his book, maybe. Yeah.
Yes. Well, he's also not sure,
Yeah.
So now he will do some serious time. He will go to a very serious prison, and we'll talk about that in the next chapter in his life. And it was like a pretty brutal prison experience, very high security, and he was treated. He was in prison as a terrorist, so he was treated pretty severely, and that really will further change him, and there will be some surprising views from him. But before he left, he wanted to cut the ties with Kathleen. And which made the things even worse for her. And she was like, well, that hurts me even more that you don't want to talk to me or something like this. But he was, like, when he was sentenced, he declared himself to be dead for the outside world. And he said, my suffering should be my own property, something like this. And, but he wasn't dead. And we'll talk more in the next episode about what happened to him next.
Man, sweet. I can't get enough of this guy. I gotta tell you. This is good stuff. What was the woman's name that kept trying to help him and he kept yelling at her in the book?
Mrs. Sefferson, I think.
Mrs.
The diamond trade.
Do you guys know? I don't know why you would, but maybe I told you. But I used to be really into just Hungarian jokes. They're very strange. It's a genre to itself. But I don't know if I ever told you guys about Aggressive Little Piglet. Are you familiar with him? This is Kajević. Aggressive. It's like an archetype in Hungarian humor, and it's this little piglet who's very aggressive. And I mean, if this is your first time hearing Hungarian humor, listener, it's a slow burn. Let's call it that. Yeah. But like these are just a couple examples that I remember. One of them is
aggressive little piglets.
So little piglet is he's like he fell down a hole or something like this in the ground, and bear comes by and says, little piglet, what's wrong? And little piglet says, I fell in this hole. And bear says, oh, okay, I'll be right back. And bear goes and grabs a ladder, and he brings the ladder back to little piglet, and he puts it in the hole, and he says, there you go, little piglet, I brought you a ladder. And piglet says, I'm not coming out. And that's what I mean, I know you're waiting for more from this, but that's what these jokes are. One of them I remember is aggressive piglet walks into like a train station.
I think Father Kajević will understand why the piglet didn't.
I think so. I think Father Kajević will get aggressive little piglet. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. He wouldn't think it's funny. He would like sympathize.
No. Yes. He'd work it into a speech in court somehow.
Yes.
Like aggressive little piglet once said when asked where he was traveling to, none of your business.
I shall never come out.
That's another one. Yeah. So there you go. Yeah. If anybody gets them, it's aggressive little piglet.
It's aggressive little piglet. Yeah.
And Father Kajević, they're made for each other. I feel like I get aggressive little piglet finally. Finally, after a decade. I understand him now.
Well, now you're gonna have to make a lot more piglet jokes on the show.
Well, they're not hard. One of them was okay, a little piglet is in a tree and bear comes by and says, hey, little piglet, what are you eating up there? And he says, peaches. And the bear says, but piglet, that's an apple tree. And piglet says, I brought them with me. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
Listen, they're not funny, but they are fascinating.
Well, yeah.
Well, yeah.
I mean, Father Kajević kind of is funny, I have to say.
He is, and fascinating.
Yes.
Yeah. He's like a punchline to a weird Hungarian joke.
Yeah.
Aggressive little priest.
Aggressive little priest. Awesome.
Father Kajević, I brought you your bail. I'm not coming out. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's literally what happened.
That's literally what happened. Yes. Yeah, his actual life is the punchline to an inscrutable Hungarian joke structure.
Yes. And then like, fuck you, God.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Aggressive little priestlet.
Yeah. But I mean, the third chapter I think will be interesting. Kind of. I think maybe you will like him more after the third chapter, at least to some degree.
I mean, that's going to be hard to do. I'm already a huge fan.
Yeah,
but
I understand that.
All right. Well, until then, boys.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. See you soon.
Later.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey there, Fritz here from The Empire Never Ended. This has been one of our weekly free episodes for free people. But for premium people, we also have weekly premium episodes, which you can get at patreon.com/tenepod, TENEPOD, and also follow our various social media things in the show description there. Like and subscribe them. Follow them. Like and follow and subscribe. Follow them. Do it.